Round is challenging certain ideas about the necessity of the use of randomness, or the questions of whether text can continue without limit. It's composed by me, by determination of what these strings will be, but the process, the generation that is undertaken is based on a well-known mathematical constant. It's also a system to highlight things about the materiality. Even in this short time, some things about the materiality of computing may be evident as this program slows down, as you see more and more steps are required for each additional computation. If you let it run for long enough, the computer will begin to run other processes more slowly. It will eventually heat up. The fan will come on and labor to cool the computer, reminding you of the material nature of computation and reminding you that even without a connection to the network, there's still many things that can be undertaken as a process. Verse, tense, vent, crease, form, intone, crease, tense, form, tense, verse, tens. Vent, increase, vent, tens, vent, in tone, tense, crease, vent, tens, in, crease, tone, inverse form, vent, tense, crease, in, tense, verse to tens to crease, verse, tens, vent, verse, tens, verse, form. Form, vent, inverse to tens, crease, vent, in. Verse, tone, tense, to tense, verse, form, tens, to increase, vent, tens, tone, tense to tens, vent, crease, form, tone, vent to tone, vent, form, into tense, crease, tone, increase, inverse. I'm now going to show something in a somewhat different and perhaps more accessible style. Stone ranges the veins, rocks dwell, brows pace the ripplings, track the sinuous, the crags exercise the rocks, heights linger, the crags exercise the shapes, stamp the dim, layers command the rock, forests relax, stones relax, brows trail the shape, progress through the sinuous, objective, clear, driven, forests sweep the basins, veins relax, heights exercise the stone, run the rough, clear, driven, layer sweeps the stone, veins dwell, shapes dwell, height frames the coves. I'd like to request a short text from someone here at the gallery. Oh, is this the password to the network? Yeah. You can type it in. No? The piece I'm reading from is Taroko Gorge, and I wrote it in Taiwan in 2009, in January 2009. Let's see. you see why I prefer not to use the network facilities of computation in my work. All right. Great. All right. This is a piece that certainly on its surface is not as unusual, as avant-garde, as difficult to understand as many of the other texts that I produce by writing computer programs. I went to a place of great natural beauty, and one of the things that is traditional for poets to do there is to write a poem about the place. And I thought, well, if this can be done, why not write a poetry generator about this place? And so, not with having in mind that I would be making fun of nature poetry, I thought, let me take this up as an idea. And I wrote this boundless poem. It also continues running as long as one likes, which represents some aspects of my experience of Taroko Gorge. This is we would call it the Grand Canyon of Taiwan, a beautiful, beautiful natural park in Taiwan. There is a form, as you can see, to this poem. There are these cave lines that end with a dash that trail off, indicating the experience of entering a tunnel in Taroko Gorge National Park, one of the tunnels that Chiang Kai-shek with his Nationalist Army drove through the mountains because they needed something to do after they came to Taiwan. And then these lines that indicate walking along a path at the beginning and end of these strophes, and lines that indicate staying and stopping and viewing at a designated viewing place. Well, this was a little bit interesting, and I was satisfied that I showed that a generator could be written in place of a poem. But what really interested me was when Scott Retberg, one of my friends and collaborators, picked this up and decided to put his own text in and to modify this program and make something of his own out of it. And so whereas I actually went to, in my own material physical body, a place in the east of natural beauty, Scott wrote a poetry generator about a place he had never been, supplied only by his feverish Western imagination and the stereotypes of Tokyo. He wrote a piece called not Taroko Gorge, but Tokyo Garage. So you can see that there are strophes generated like Buddha freaks the bureaucrats, Roppongi drunks twist, cowboy skin the pink kitten, prostitutes preserve the altruist, and so on. And then J.R. Carpenter, who lives in Devon now, is the creator of Gorge, this piece which takes the endless nature of Taroko Gorge, and instead of being about traversing a place of natural beauty, becomes about gluttony and endless consumption. Savor the elegant cardamom, cinnamon, cordial, digestive tracts cultivate the dressing, smell stew, pours heat. So here it's an engagement, not just using my code to learn about how JavaScript works, but also an engagement with a particular form that I devised, and development of that, or parody of that, perhaps, if you like. And there's plenty of interesting examples. Mark samples Take George, about a famous Asian American actor. There's a fan fiction example by Flourish Clink. If it's going to load, it may not. There's a very elaborate piece by Andrew Plotkin, which remixes all of the existing remixes, showing the code alongside the output. There's the taboos of experimental writing right there, the first word. And then some people also took this work and they didn't actually engage with a particular form that I was creating. They made further modifications and developed their own system, and they said that they use this as a starting point, which is great. And one of these is Sunny Ray Tempest's work, Camel Tail, which generates these quatrains that are just composed at random of Metallica lyrics from their 9 studio albums. So you get the, and that seems pretty plausible in a lot of cases, right? No need for confession now, life planned out before my birth, nothing could I say, witch hunt writing through, better than you. That one even rhymes. So there's a variety of work that's been done, about 24 pieces that I know of that are published. It's used as exercise material in classes. And you know, this is part of the purpose of developing a book like Shebang and the programs that go into this, and showcasing the code to the program alongside its output, letting people see something and learn something about computing. I also want to give you a little preview of the next book that's coming out. This is another simple piece done around the same time originally as Taroko Gorge, called The Two. The police officer nears the alleged perpetrator. He seeks help from him. Each one learns something. The rescuer locates the survivalist. She expresses sympathy to him. The underdog ends up on top. The indigent turns to the librarian. He smacks him. The underdog ends up on top. The student knocks on the teacher's door. She confesses to her. They pray together. The driver calls to the pedestrian. She confesses to him. They wait in silence. Now, if you approach this not simply as a visual process, as a screensaver, but as something that is a text that one could read and understand in the way that texts are typically understood, then there are some problems in interpretation that arise in this very simple combinatorial system. The driver calls to the pedestrian. He asks for advice from her. We have to figure out which is the driver and which is the pedestrian. One of these is male and one of these is female. One is asking advice and one is being asked. We know that, but we don't know exactly how to resolve this. So when you see a line like, for instance, the rescuer locates the survivalist, he begs her, is the survivalist or the rescuer the male figure in this case? Which one is being begged? This might depend on power relationships and authority. It might depend on our stereotypes, our gender stereotypes, which might be stronger or weaker for different terms in here. We might have in mind that a librarian or a babysitter, stereotypically female, and have less of an idea about a driver or a shopper. And then there's some tactical reasons as well that one might prefer one interpretation over another. Well, this is a piece that I think is of some interest in raising these questions, but really becomes interesting not just when read, but actually when translated. And so Serge Bouchardon did a version of this in French, and you might imagine that there would be some difficulties because the way that I've described the piece, it's rather important to leave the gender of the characters in the first line ambiguous. And how can we do that in French? Because we need to actually indicate gender in almost every case. But Serge Bouchardon has actually just devised new characters like the economist and the entrepreneur. It's unique words that are applied equally well to men and women. And then because they begin with vowels, the article is elided, so we don't see in writing whether this character is male or female, right? And so it actually becomes an interesting investigation of French as a language. In French, you can say, of course, a hint would be one of these words, like the police officer, or the police agent, that would be either male or female. But in Spanish, you can't get away with that because agente, you have to say el agente or la agente. You don't have an article that's elided, so you can't get away with it that easily. And Carlos Leon took a much more elaborate process of trying to define a situation in which there must be these two characters, but they're not mentioned explicitly. And there's a version in Japanese. One of the difficulties here is that that second line, where the pronouns come in, is almost rude in Japanese to use so many pronouns. You normally would omit them, but here they're necessary to make that point of the gender of the characters. And then there's a Polish and Russian version as well. And in these cases, the translators identified certain classes of words that could apply to men and women equally. So one of these, for instance, the gray eminence of the department, the great hope of poetry. These are terms that might equally well apply and they could be used. But they also found that some of these terms, like there are some terms that are feminine grammatically, but they apply equally well to men and women. And these terms almost all are very negative and derogatory, terms like ninny or victim, right? So it's very interesting to see I mean, linguists know this already, no doubt, but we're exploring it and we're finding it through practice, through making translations and poems. And I just want to advertise, very briefly, I'm not going to go into these, but having had the experience of working some with translators and having my work translated, I wanted to get in on the fun of doing this, and I also wanted to show people in the English language community that there's been a lot of productive computer text work done in other cultures and other languages. And so we developed this rendering project, and we've published one phase of it so far. And for instance, Amilcar Romero's poem 21 is an example for the Commodore 64. This is the English translation of his Spanish language, Argentine Spanish poetry generator running in a Commodore 64 emulator. And we have bilingual work like Santa No Kosho by Andrew Campana. We have work by members of the Ulipo, Paul Brafor, and Marcel Benabo. A variety of poetry generators in different languages. It's interesting to see Shinonome Nodoka's contemporary Japanese poetry generator. Shoe, shower, past year test. I wonder if the shoe dons something. The shoe meets, lives, goes. I wonder if the shoe dons something. And then we can reload it. Wednesday. The dark, small Wednesday is, the Wednesday falls. It falls because it is a Wednesday. The Wednesday gives birth, works, falls. The Wednesday that works forgets. So one of the things is we see repetition used in a lot of these poetry generators in interesting ways, but only in this Japanese example is there repetition of words down through a strophe. In the Spanish language generator that Felix Ramirez did, the repetition often occurs along the line. And then we also have a free verse Polish poetry generator, which repeats things in a different way. So I'm not claiming that these fully characterize the cultures of poetry in these different places, but it's interesting to see and compare the different possibilities, and I think they're related to the cultures from which they come. All right, before I return to a more proper reading, there's another set of work that I want to show off, and that's this memory slam. So I developed this for an event, the first Code Poetry Slam at New York University. And it's a re-implementation, so none of these, as you can see from the dates, none of these are written by me. These are well-known to some people, early examples of creative text generation. Christopher Strachey's Love Letters being one of these. We have a system that developed on the Ferranti Mark I in 1952, and never, I think, considered that seriously as a literary project, although it's documented in an art magazine, Encounter. This is a system for generating love letters. Honey duck, my sympathy, beautifully lust after your devotion. You are my breathless sympathy, my impatient fellow feeling. My dear desire, keenly wants your yearning. You are my lovesick wish, yours impatiently. MUC, it's Manchester University Computer. And Teolut's stochastic texts, a really excellent example, I think. A very simple system that takes its lexicon from Kafka's The Castle and produces these powerful sorts of existential statements that are juxtaposed with one another. Every farmer is silent, no village is far. An eye is large, not every guest is silent. Not every laborer is quiet, not every stranger is narrow. Not every church is old or a house is open. And I think the conjunction between this reference and intertextual use of Kafka's language and the syntax and recombination here that is done in an alienated way is particularly effective. One thing I want to show you about this is that part of the reason I implemented these is so that one could save the web page on one's desktop, open it up. Now, if I just double click on it, I'll see the same thing that I saw before. So I'll open this up with the text editor. And I can go in and make changes. It doesn't actually matter whether I know much or anything about coding. I can go and find the words that interest me in this file. Count, stranger, look, church, okay, there's some words. And I can just replace them with other words. Like, let's say, I want to be a good American, so instead of having this a German language Czech story about obsession and alienation, I want an American story about obsession and alienation, right? I want to use, say, the terms from Moby Dick that are interesting to me and that would connect to this, okay? So I'll just go in, instead of count, I'll say whale, ship, harpoon, boat, sky, sea, leg, hammer, doubloon, sailor. All right, and so there's some words, and I save that, and I open this up again. And now I have a new computational literary work here. Don't claim that it's a great example of literary art, but I think it's different. I think it's doing something else besides what was being originally done by Theo Lutz's piece. And Theo Lutz's piece, of course, is in translation. It's in German originally, so this is an English translation of his piece. But here you have things like, no leg is near, every sea is strong, no whale is far, or every sea is new, every whale is old, a harpoon is angry. It's pretty good, every whale is old, a harpoon is angry. So this seems like an interesting process to me, and so this is what I invite students, participants in workshops, and anyone on the web to do with my own work and also with some of this historical work. And so we also have the permutation poems of, this is actually a really boring web page unless you go in and modify it, because it's just giving you this permutation poem. However, it's actually computationally generated by JavaScript, so if you go in and change those 5 words, you'll get these 4 words, you'll get a different poem. And then A House of Dust is another one. And so just as some people make work that's based on mine, I have done work based directly on A House of Dust, a modification and erasure of that. So I want to read a bit more from Shebang, or from the poems output in Shebang, and then conclude with a few visual works, 2 of them for the Commodore 64, and then I'll start running one of the short Perl pieces that is along the lines of the program that was up here before. All right. So, let's see here. So I'll read from the series PPG 256, Perl Poetry Generators in 256 characters. And these are very short programs. They're actually, they're not quite tweetable, but they're within, they're less than twice as large as a tweet. And so let's take a look here. So this one has some comments in it, but the program itself is right there. And so I'll read from PPG 256, 1, 2, and 3. There's 7 in the series, but I'll read from the first 3 in the series. And I'll explain after each one what some of my interests were in developing them. The Mand, cost on lake, kale no rack. The boon, coat of moan. The car, cas on tail, hats at hags, take to mots. The lack, cogs at toke, ding to cads, canned at poke, buns, no dits, past, no mast. In this first generator, I was trying to create a program completely self-contained, not using any data or resources beyond those 256 characters of code. That would be identifiable as a poetry generator, at least to a sympathetic audience, and that would have a large vocabulary of English and English-like words. So to develop this, I needed actually to devise a different means of constructing words than the common way that Claude Shannon described in Mathematical Theory of Communication, the use of a Markov process and conditional probabilities to determine how to build a word character by character. And so this uses a model in which I'm trying to develop essentially four-letter words from independent initial and final bigrams. The buzz, coat at maps, pant no bups, moat of maps, tail at cabs, reign of pear, conch to mans. And here's number 2. The spins, the bill and grill, bin, to grit, the spill, ball, grill, the bat sits bin, twit, the chits, shin fans pill, chit of sill, the chit, spill, shills the twill, of pin, a fall, ban, a fall, of skit. The grins, of sill, fits a chit, a fan, the skin, the kill, twit. Skin grins of grin, fill skins to shin. A chit, grill, fit. In number 2, I wanted to develop more variation in the strophe shape, in word length, in line length, but I wasn't as concerned with producing a very large vocabulary. And as a bonus, there's much more rhyme because there's only 3 possible word endings for the open class words that I generate. I'll look at number 3 next. In this one, I was trying to develop not exactly narratives or stories, but some types of situations that would have narrativity that might lead people to think that something was happening. And I was also interested in using compound words to do so. The red man god and one red god elf ran us. The wax elf bot and one red orc boy ran her. The wan god elf and one fat boy eel met us. One hip nun elf and the elf boy ran on. The wan eel bot and one red nun ape hit up. So let me switch to something visual here. There are 4 more poems in this series, and I developed these really to explore different possibilities in highly constrained language. And another way that the language of code can be constrained is to develop a single line of Commodore 64 BASIC that produces something that is interesting from the standpoint of reading, from the standpoint of prolific language, from the standpoint of poetry. And so I decided to develop something that would actually relate to a well-known poem by Arthur Rimbaud, and this is called Voyelle for Christian Book. It also relates to Christian Book's project Eunoia. So this is a Commodore 64 this is a Commodore 64 program, and I'll run it for you in a. I did not bring my Commodore 64, which is of the wrong video system anyway for this locale, but I will run this in a software Commodore 64 emulator. So I just want to show you, to interrupt, literally, that we can list the program. It actually visually is produced as 3 lines, but it has a single line number, line 0 there. And that's the program that is doing everything here. And it's simply coloring, it's producing the vowels at random, and it's coloring them according to Rimbaud's scheme. So A is black, E is white. Then the background color and border color are changing at random so that different constellations appear because, for instance, when the background is blue, we can't see any of the O's. All right, and so this one is in BASIC, but I also have a machine language program that one that's written in assembly that I'll show you. And this is 2 minutes long, and this is essentially the last thing I wanted to share with you tonight. And it's called Chronon. And actually, let me do this first. I'll show you. So I've just opened this in a hex editor here. So this is the program. It's a 32-byte program. So this not only can be tweeted, it could probably be used as a phone number in some countries. Certainly actually it could be used as a Wi-Fi network name. Very, very short text. And to write these short texts is, I consider not just a trivial exercise, but actually an engagement with the system and platform that I'm working in, whether it's Perl or the Commodore 64. And that all of the people who are involved in the development of these systems had some ideas about computing, which are serious ideas, and I want to engage with those ideas by trying to explore what it is they built, the artifact that they made. So here's Chronon. I need to start it with sys 4096. All right, and this is alphabet expanding from the same series as my first piece that was up at the very beginning, letter form terrain. Here's alphabet expanding. I'll close with this.